Rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace, blessings, and mercy of Allah be with you wherever you have joined us from. A warm welcome to this week's Religious Dialogue program. As we are living important days of Dhul Hijjah, and we are building up to the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, the day that is marked by all the Muslims as the Eid al-Adha, that is the topic that we will be, inshallah, discussing with our expert guests, who will shed more light on the significance of Eid al-Adha and how we can enhance our celebrations of this important day. Joining me for the discussion is Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin, Syed Mohammad Razavi, who is the resident scholar and the head of the Religious Advisory Board at the Shia Islamic Education Society in London, where the Syed deals with marital issues and family issues, and he has over 40 years of experience in dealing with such matters and resolving them in accordance to the Islamic Sharia. Assalamu alaikum, Syed.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Also joining me for the discussion is Syed Ammar Ali Naqvi. A brief introduction of Syed Ammar is that he has studied at the Oxford University and King's College in London. He is also studied at the Hawza Ilmiya in Qum. Currently, he is studying in the Hawza Ilmiya of Najaf, and he has founded the Thaqalain Institute in Oxford, which is an organization that focuses on social, spiritual, and academic needs of those in Oxford and beyond. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sayyid Ammar, and a warm welcome to the program.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for giving us your time. I will start with you, Sayyid Ammar. If you can give us a bit of an overview and a brief introduction of Eid al-Adha and the religious significance of this event in Islam.
Of course. So Eid al-Adha is a celebration, of course, for all of historical, we would say, importance. And this is a story I think that we are all familiar with. We learn growing up and we learn in the madaris. And it's quite ubiquitous in regards to how much we've heard and learnt about it. However, just to reiterate some of the major themes that we celebrate when it comes to Eid, say the sacrifice of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. And this sacrifice, of course, in question is when I allude to the fact that he had passed all of the trials and tribulations, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left one more for him, which was the most difficult one, which was to take the life of his son. So at the point in time when Nabi Ibrahim was ready to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the son Ismail was replaced with a ram. And of course, this is why to this day the sacrificing of the ram takes place in, for example, Saudi Arabia, where the Hajj procession takes place, and of course all over the world. We can say that this is something that has become quite synonymous with Eid al-Adha.
Thank you for this explanation, Sayyid Ammar. I think we have lost your camera footage. We could only hear you. If you would like to, whilst I speak to Sayyid Razavi, if you would like to log out and log back in, and inshallah we can have your connection re-established. Sayyid Razavi, of course, these are important days and nights of Hajj, and there are so many Hujjaj who have gone to the holy land of Hijaz to perform the Hajj rituals. What would you like to say to the Hujjaj and about Eid al-Adha that we are approaching?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Eid, first of all, means something you wish to go back to or look forward to going back for it. And each Eid has a different meaning. And Eid al-Adha teaches or reminds us of the great sacrifice that took place in history. Although if we look at the history of sacrifices, it existed from the beginning of the creation of human being and the settlement of human being on this planet Earth by the children of Hazrat Adam, Habil and Qabil, and one of the child's sacrifice was accepted, and other ones was not accepted, and then this chain of sacrifice and ritual of sacrifice and tradition continued throughout the history of humankind, and we see examples of that taking place in different periods of time of different prophets. For example, in Judaism, in Christianity, in even during when Hazrat Nuh, the Ark of Nuh settled after the floods, the first thing he did was paid thanks by sacrificing some animals in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also this tradition of sacrifice existed amongst the non-believers as well. And they used to do two different kinds of sacrifices. One was releasing the animal into the wild, and this was a kind of considered as waste of an animal and money. And the other sacrifice was over the idols and statues, and they used to just throw away the meat that was sacrificed. So Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, when he came, he gave a different meaning to this sacrifice, and then Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, continuing the tradition of Hazrat Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, re-established that as a reminder of a great sacrifice with a different philosophy, or misunderstood philosophy was re-established by Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So on this sacrifice day, which happens after the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially for the pilgrims who have been to Hajj this year, they go to Maidan or the valley of Arafah, and they spend some time there getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the next step and following step that they have to do, and which completes also the ritual, is the sacrifice, which includes stoning the shaitan, which is part of this sacrifice, because when this sacrifice was being taken place, shaitan tried to deceive, and stones were thrown at the shaitan. So in the remembrance of that, we also repeat the ritual and tradition. And basically this sacrifice and the pilgrimage of Hajj is a kind of reminder for us as Muslims to know our responsibilities and duties, especially at this time of at this time when the world and Muslims are going through great difficulties, especially the Muslims in some parts of the world are giving their sacrifices, and so we should remember them, and this is a test for us as well, that how do we sacrifice our values, our values for the sake of the benefit of others, and for the sake of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yes, we will talk more in detail about the messages and of this Eid, inshallah, as we go along in the program. But you mentioned something important there. You mentioned rituals. I would like to come to you, Syed Ammar, and ask you about the difference between this Eid from Eid al-Fitr, because Muslims have two common Eids that we celebrate, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. What are the differences between these two Eids?
So there are many overlapping themes. Primarily, I would say the ghusl, of course, is the same with both ziyarah of Imam Hussain, the adhkar. Of course, the Eid prayer itself is that's similar between both of the religious days. However, I would say the particular Eid would be the sacrifice itself, which of course, as the respected Syed mentioned, has its own implications in regards to why sacrifice is important at this time of year and what it represents and what we're supposed to learn moving forward. So there are many, I would say, similar themes, but also on the same notes, there are also themes that make the two different days unique.
Thank you. Syed Razavi, I would like to ask you, what is the importance of the qurbani, the animal that we sacrifice on Eid al-Adha, and why has this ritual been chosen specifically for this sacrifice?
Well, I mean, the Hajj does not complete without doing this sacrifice. So it is very important that this Hajj, I mean, the ritual of Hajj does not complete without it. And as I mentioned earlier, that it is a reminder of the great sacrifice that was done by Prophet Ibrahim, and especially it's Sunnah of Ibrahim that we are continuing, and that's what Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to be proud of and used to mention repeatedly and remind us that we are the followers of the Sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And by mentioning Sunnah of Ibrahim, it includes Christians and Jews as well, that it is a reminder for them as well that we all go back to Prophet Ibrahim and previous prophets. So we need to be united, we need to be together, and on this path of being united, which the conference or seminar or gathering of Hajj itself is a kind of uniting Muslims from all different parts of the world, and making them know each other, and also it is an opportunity to be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our responsibility towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So of course, what a better way to end this ritual by a sacrifice. And of course there is a purpose behind it, to remember the poor and needy in the society. Although most of the sacrifices are wasted, which is not the aim of the sacrifice. The aim is to that meat should be given to the poor and needy, and the Saudi authorities should make more effort, so not a single piece of meat is wasted from this sacrifice. So one of the
That's an
philosophies
important
of
point you're saying there, Syed, because there are
sacrifice
so
is
many
fulfilled.
hundreds and
Yeah.
thousands of sacrifices are done on that small land. What is done with all of that meat that is sacrificed there? Does it reach the needy and the poor, or are there obstacles in that?
Well, I have been told that they have somehow organized it, but it's still a lot of meat is still wasted, which is wrong, which is not. Islam is against israf. So, and according to some Ayatullah and Maraj Taqlid, just in order to stop this wastage, they have even allowed sacrifice to be done in poor and needy countries. So every year, according to those Maraj Taqlid who allow this, we receive telephone calls, and I request brothers and sisters in poor parts of the world to do the sacrifice with the intention of the brother who's doing Hajj, and when it is done, we inform them back in Mecca that your sacrifice is done and you can complete the Hajj. But this is not the common fatwa. Only very few Ayatullahs or Maraj Taqlid allow this kind of sacrifice away from the city of Mecca.
That's interesting, and it's worth researching whether there is an ihtiyat on this, because it would make more sense to have your qurbani being done and the sacrifice being done where you can reach the needy and the poor. Sayyid Ammar, what is the significance of this sacrificial animal that Hujjaj and other Muslims have to do on Eid al-Adha?
So the significance and the symbolism of the sacrifice itself is, of course, there are some implications in regards to the type of animal, which I think would be beyond the scope of our discussion. However, more so, the philosophy of sacrifice is the concept that is in the Eid celebration act itself. So sacrifice, stand it to be something that a essential aspect of human life, whether you are religious or irreligious. So understanding this from a divine worldview, Islamic worldview, we can see very clearly that understanding and reimposing the importance of sacrifice then allows us to really live our lives in a more manner. For example, if someone wants to be in their education, that requires a degree of sacrifice. Spending time with your friends, you need to own leisure time in order to achieve this, so to speak. This applies in any realm of lives, whether it's in work, whether it's in family, therefore Islam really gave us this annual reminder that yes, you are doing a very physical, as of course its physical benefits such as feeding the needy. However, on the same note, it also have a very personal benefits to realize that the essence of life is very wise. Things that we hold, we would say, valuable things that we hold close, and if we have the sacrifice them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us something. However, if we choose not to sacrifice them and to feed our carnal desire, so to speak, then there would be no growth. So Allah gave us the opportunity that if you choose to sacrifice these desires you have, I will give you something. If you don't, you will remain at the level you are.
And how does this sacrificing an animal, is it wajib on everybody? How does it foster a sense of community and charity amongst Muslims, Syed Ammar? Your voice is lagging a little bit because you are joining us from Najaf. So if you speak slowly, inshallah, your voice will be more clear with us.
But wujub, of course, has different implications on where you are. For example, if you Hajj or if you are not performing that. However, the second part of your question, in regards, does it foster a sense of community, a global sense of community? That would come back to the larger concept. And speaking about sacrifice, sacrifice and community are all hand in hand. Because personally, there are many examples that we can all do. Example to do things on my life on my own and so forth. And these things will be more difficult. For example, are more difficult than do yourself at home. But almost automatically, you when community and when living in a society, you sacrifice some elements of personal comfort that you're doing things yourself in order to maintain that aspect of the international and global ummah. So the act of the sacrifice, of course, on a personal basis, feeding the poor and needy and sacrificing the animal. But on a macro basis, it's saying that the sacrifice that you are doing is also that you need to do for your own personal desire, so that you can maintain ties with the community. And if we are, we would say, decrease in the current ummah or the community is in this form, or is in a way. So the only way to get rid of this and the only way to mitigate would be for us to actually understand the philosophy of sacrifice, the reason of sacrifice, and sometimes put the needs of others before us.
Thank you for this explanation. Syed Razavi, regarding some more fiqhi masalas about the sacrificial animal that we have to sacrifice, is it wajib on everybody, and does everybody have to offer the sacrifice, or and how many is it per individual? Is it per family? How does this religious obligation work?
Well, as far as those who have gone for pilgrimage, whether with the intention of wajib or non-wajib, their ritual cannot complete without this sacrifice. So they have to, whether they like it or not, they have to do the sacrifice to complete the Hajj ritual. But for the people who are not doing Hajj, like it is a tradition every year that, especially in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and other countries, the ritual is that people go and buy an animal and sacrifice it and then distribute the meat in the neighborhood and relatives and friends to remember everyone. That is not wajib, although some people do it as a really obligation, but it is not wajib for non-hajis to do that. Recommended if you can do it, why not? And but the main point is, if you really want to do this kind of, I mean, if you're not a haji, if you're not gone for hajj and you want to do the sacrifice, make sure that meat reaches the poor and needy people to get more sawab and also benefit in this world and the world hereafter as well. For example, I have connections with the orphanages around the world where they need help, and this kind of help during this period of time. For example, people who live in London, they want to do sacrifice. Although it has become a tradition here that butchers and slaughterhouses advertise that they can do qurbani for you if you are living in London or America or elsewhere. They can do it on your behalf. Although the restrictions are there in these countries that you cannot do it at home or in front of people. It has to be done in a slaughter house in a proper place, but they still do it. I would say that do it in a poor country where it benefits other people and you get more reward as well by doing that sacrifice. For example, in Africa, I usually send money to East Africa, where a goat or a sheep would cost around £45, which is unimaginable. I mean, in the same goat would be even more expensive in Pakistan or Iran or elsewhere, but in Africa, a £45 goat can feed at least 200 to 300 orphan children, and when they are fed with this sacrifice, they pray for you. So, of course, the spiritual benefit and the benefit for you in the world hereafter is far greater than what you would get by giving meat, especially in European or Western countries, to your neighbors who might even say, why did they give this meat to us? And they might even not like it. So we
And
have to do
who
it
have
in a
this
way that it benefits more.
yes, and in the West, people have the facility to eat meat more readily available to them.
Yeah.
Of course, not forgetting orphanages in Yemen, orphanages in Pakistan, in India, orphanages in Iraq, and so on. But Syed, isn't there a religious ruling? Because I thought a part of the meat has to be kept for the person themselves. So is there a special niyyah that has to be done if the entire animal is sacrificed and distributed among the poor?
First of all, when you are not doing pilgrimage, the sacrifice is not wajib. So any ruling, any guideline is not wajib. So even, I mean, yes, if you were in a poor, if you were living in a poor country and you did the sacrifice, yes, it is good to follow that tradition that give part of the meat to your relatives and friends. But when you are doing a sacrifice with a greater purpose of feeding orphans and needy, then that guideline can be ignored because it's not wajib. The whole sacrifice in this Eid for non-pilgrims is not wajib at all.
I understand.
It's highly
Thank you.
recommended.
Of course, you touched upon some of the challenges that Muslims face in celebrating Eid al-Adha here in the West. Sayyid Ammar, would you like to add any more to that? The differences and the difficulties that Muslims face in the West when it comes to celebrating this Eid, Eid al-Adha, versus celebrating it in non-Muslim majority countries?
It's definitely different types. Look
Sorry, we can't hear you. Your voice
in
is
Muslims
cutting
as
off.
opposed to non-Muslims. Is it clearer now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah. So I said that there is a distinction Muslims in, of course, Muslims and non-Muslim countries, and in regards to what they can actually. So, of course, in countries there are no such restrictions in regards to sacrifice and so on and so forth. But those restrictions, physical basis, might exist in non-Muslims. So, of course, the law of the land needs to be abided. So that might be a particular difference. However, to answer your question, I would say more so. I would say that the biggest thing that we need to bear in mind, whether it's in a Muslim country or a country, when taking into consideration, is the intention behind it. So we need to make sure that the sacrifice, the intention of the sacrifice, we're not for any other purpose than to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because I've been part of conversations, for example, where to be had of there has to be a particular type of, if this particular type of goat is not there, then it reputational damage and so on and so forth. This doesn't distinguish whether a non-Muslim country, is more so that we need to understand and really reinforce the actual purpose of this celebration is, which is understand sacrifice and humility. So those notions, then of course difficulties will be there for a Muslim living in a non-Muslim country. But if they just remind themselves of the principles of what they're doing this in the first place, then their sacrifices with the will of Allah.
Thank you, Syed. Razavi, of course, said Ammar explained about the criteria for choosing the animal, the sacrificial animal. We see in India and Pakistan these animals being paraded around, being decorated and shown off. And of course, there is aziyat, there is the harm in it for the animal itself. It's uncomfortable. And also then when it comes to the celebrations of Eid, after the animal has been sacrificed, we see a lot of mixed gatherings and, in Eid where everybody lets loose to celebrate the Eid. What is your message, and what do you have to say about these things that we see in terms of celebrating Eid al-Adha?
Yes, I mean, there is no doubt there are special rules and regulations about the sacrifice, what type of animal it should be, and there is a verse of Holy Quran which says that sacrifice from what you love and what you like for yourself. So don't give away an ill or something, an ill animal that is not wanted, and suddenly you just sacrifice it. Sacrifice will be accepted, but the ruling is that do it as if you are going to consume it yourself. So how you take care of yourself, you take care of other poor and needy people as well. And one of the philosophies behind sacrifice is that these are recommendations that you should yourself take the knife in your hand and touch it over the neck of the sacrifice and do it to follow the mustahab principles. But I have personally been to Hajj more than 15 times, and because of the crowd and the difficulties and problems, it is not possible to take every single Haji to the sacrifice place and do that. It is just practically not possible. So what we do is we send a representative who is expert and who knows how to do it, and we give wikala shar'iyya from which is a valid wikala from Shari point of view, and that person who is doing it, he does it, and then we wait for the telephone call in Mina until we receive the message. When we receive the message that the sacrifice is done, then we can go further for following A'mal to complete the Hajj. So these are the principles that has to be adhered and followed very strictly. But as I said, these are all recommendations, and the ulama and scholars have taken care of many difficulties and issues in relation to this in the at the time of Hajj, and especially for the people who have not gone for Hajj, how to do it, and they have made kind of life easier for the people who want to somehow get the thawab of this sacrifice. And as far as the other part of the question regarding Eid, as I mentioned at the beginning of my interview in this program, Eid is a day you wish to go back for it. So, but unfortunately, what happens at the time of Eid, people forget all the a'mal. Maybe they have done a'mal Arafah the day before, but on the Eid they forget halal and haram and music and dance and this and that, and mixed gatherings take place, and everything is ruined. And same thing happens at the time of Eid al-Fitr. People fast for 30 days, and when Eid comes they forget all Islamic values and start doing wrong things. So that will not be Eid according to Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam used to say, Eid is the day when you do not commit sin. So if you are celebrating Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha by committing sin, it will not be an Eid from Allah's point of view, from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's point of view. It will be Eid when you do not commit sin. So if every single day I do not commit sin, and this is the translation of the narration by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, every day that you do not commit sin is Eid. So, and especially if there is a Eid day, you start the Eid day with music and dance and wrong kind of gatherings, then of course that is not a real Eid for you or anyone else.
Or we pray namaz and then we indulge in these acts.
Yeah,
And Eid itself comes from the word auda, returning back to Allah
yeah,
subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyid
yeah.
Ammar, what is the spiritual significance of the pilgrimage that coincides with Eid al-Adha?
So, quite extensive traditions on the spiritual significance of the we would say the Hajj, of course, which culminates in the sacrifice, and this is going along side by side in a parallel manner the story of Nabi Ibrahim, of course. So, as the respected sage just mentioned, the throwing of the rock, and Shaitan appearing and trying to guide Nabi Ibrahim to commit to this final sacrifice with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the entirety of we would say Hajj and procedure has very deep spiritual significance behind it. So the throwing of the stones, stick to this example, each we would hear it in from some of the scholars, represents is not just an activity of stones. Each stone is supposed to represent a that you commit, you would say, on the races, and the throwing of this represents the annihilation. So when one throws these rocks and of them, then going back after, of course, the ceremony of Hajj and not or indulging oneself in these acts, then you can say Hajj has definitely had longevity and value. This has been mentioned is not so much the acts on the day, as important as they are, but it's the longevity which they serve. So if we have sustained akhlaq, have sustained, we would say, needs that we take from the lessons and the rules of Hajj and move forward, then this we would regard as successful. But keeping a bit closer to what is the spiritual significance of them all, as I quite an extensive discussion, which is if we
your voice is lagging
just
a
look at
little
the
bit.
itself.
If you come closer to your phone, maybe we would be able to hear you a bit better. You just lagged there. We lost you for a few seconds. Yes, that's
Problem. Do let me know if you So, as I mentioned, Imam Zain al-Abidin, with his companion, we have a beautiful tradition from him, where he mentions all of the acts of Hajj, and each act coincides with a act of spirits. And this is, as I mentioned, a tradition of quite length and detail. But nonetheless, to any of the individuals who are listening who would want to know more about the spiritual aspects of Hajj, we will say pilgrimage Eid that it concludes in. Imam Zain al-Abidin has written it here in incredible, and there's a lot of lesson to take away from it in regards to the physical act is coinciding spiritual actors.
Yes, Syed, you have mentioned a very important hadith of the fourth holy Imam in regards to Hajj, and I think people who perform Hajj and have not read this hadith and have not contemplated on how the Imam explained the significance of every ritual and what it should mean and how we should change our thinking in accordance to that ritual really would feel that they have not done Hajj at the end. We are approaching the end of the program and we have the last 5 minutes left. Syed Razavi, I would like you to give your final message and conclusion to the audience that are listening to us tonight.
Yeah, Bismillah. First of all, we as Muslims are going through very difficult time, and many of the Muslims are suffering around the world, and we as Muslims have a responsibility and duty to remember them at this important time of Eid, and learn lessons from their sacrifices and do our responsibility and duty towards them. And I don't need to explain what are the responsibilities and duties. Every Muslim who lives in different part of the world has different responsibility and duty. They should embark on doing their responsibility and duty according to the time and place and circumstances they are in. People who are in the middle of troubled zone, they have a greater responsibility and duty, and those who are away from the troubled zone, they are not exempt as well. They have to do their responsibility and duty by doing what is obligatory upon them to support the oppressed people of the world. And if they don't do this, their Eid will not be Eid. So may Allah give us tawfiq to be the true followers of Ahlebait wasalam, true supporters of oppressed people, and true supporters of those who will be the leaders of the oppressed people, inshallah.
Thank you. And you have already explained that sacrifice in its true form does not mean that we eat ourselves, but we have to also feed others. And I understand there is a hadith also that with every single hair on the sacrificial animal and every single drop of blood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants forgiveness to the people who have sacrificed these animals and have fed others, the needy around the world. Sayed Ammar, again, what is your concluding remark? And also, how can we enhance the celebrations of Eid al-Adha as Muslims, whether we are in the West or in the East?
Enhancement of the celebrations, I would say, come back to the Ma'sumin. We have a tradition from Imam Ja'far alayhi salam, where he narrates Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said Imam Ali used to take rest on 4 days. One would be the first of Rajab, that would be the middle of Sha'ban, the third would be Fitr, and the fourth would be Eid al-Adha. So importance of these days. And when he speaks about rest, of course, Amir al-Mu'mineen's rest and our rest has a difference between them. And then Imam Ja'far Sadiq continued in the explanation. He said when it comes to the rest of Imam Ali, he stated the days he would partake in a particular worship that would gain him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we stay close to the mental tenets of Eid, not our current innovations of what our intent of Eid is, as a day of yeshin and a day of sacrifice, but also as a day, then we can keep true to the words of the Ahmad, as the respected Syed just mentioned, the philosophy of sacrifice, of your unity come hand in hand. So opportunity, yes, for us to sacrifice, us to grow closer to inshallah join as the Ummah that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi legislated for us to become.
But many would also say, Sayyid Ammar, that family gatherings and celebrating with the family is also a form of worship. So what kind of worship are you exactly talking about?
Most definitely, but there's a place, correct? I'm not saying do the entirety of one or the other. There's definitely hours of the day for early for these types of prayers, but waking up in the morning may be a difficulty for some. However, nonetheless, the opportunity for an individual to partake in those acts of, when they come back, time with the family itself, if appropriately, is also an act of ibadah. So there's a time in each, and looking at the words of the Ma'asumin, we need to make sure apply each aspect to the purpose for which.
I think, like you say, when we are engrossed in our celebrations and the jashan, sometimes we miss our salah, sometimes it's delayed, and I think that also we need to pay attention to. Eid is not Eid without those basic forms of worship. Thank you so much for joining us, Sayyid Ammar, all the way from Najaf. Thank you very much, Sayyid Razavi. Thank you to both the guests for their time and for sharing the knowledge with us. Thank you, dear viewers, for your attentive listening. Enjoy your Eid, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your ibadat and your acts of worship. Join us again next week for another episode of the Religious Dialogue program. Until then, I leave you all under the care and protection of Almighty